Hi, welcome back to Crafting with Kimberly. I'm Kimberly Canale, and today we're going to be making faux stained glass. Stained glass is a great project to be able to do, but it takes an awful lot of materials and it's kind of expensive, and you've got a great risk of burning yourself. This is a fun way to get the pretty results, but not quite so dangerous. This is faux stained glass. You can see as I hold it up to the light, it does look from a distance like stained glass. But today we're going to be painting and using a unique way to get all the little swirlies to give it the look of stained glass and the transparency. So let's make some faux stained glass. For this project, the supplies we're going to need are a picture frame. You can actually use any size picture frame that you want. Just make sure that the picture you choose to recreate will fit in the frame. I'm using Dollar Tree picture frames for my demonstration. I'm going to be using a 5x7. If you were able to receive a kit from the class, you received an 8.5x11 and a small one. You need to have some pictures. Any kind of coloring book picture will do, and basically the more simple the better. You want just some nice clip art or a coloring book picture, anything that has just some good basic lines. You don't want a lot of detail in it. This is one that I happen to draw myself. This is another one that I drew myself that I'll be showing. This is the actual picture that we will be using for the demonstration, and we'll have the link to this picture also on the video. If you get into something like this is still geometrics and stained glass examples. Still very nice as a stained glass picture. But you definitely want to do a large picture with this. So you would want maybe like a 16x20 or something larger, because when we're using the glue and the paint together, it will spread out. Even if you're using paint, it has a tendency to spread a little bit. So something that was this small probably would not work as well. This picture would be great, but I would definitely make it into a bigger picture. So you want your picture of choice. You will also need to use some Mod Podge for the back. That's how we get the neat little swirlies, and it hides a lot of stuff, like any mistakes you might make. It's great. Many of the sites that I was on that showed how to do this suggested using a regular Mod Podge, like a matte Mod Podge, but mix it with a little bit of glossy, just so it's got a little bit more shine to it. So it really doesn't matter. You can use either or, it is fine. But if you want to mix it, that you can. You need any kind of acrylic paints. I'm happening to use Artist Loft acrylic paints in the colors that you choose. So you want some paints. Again, I mentioned this is my preferred method. I really like using this puffy. This is a tulip puffy slick black paint. I liked this instead, as you can see, very, very small, thin tip. You're able to get much smaller lines with it. I did about 23 of these pictures for class, so let me say my thumb is still not right, because this squeezes out really hard if you do a lot in a row. So it's not bad, but it does have a tendency to squeeze out a little harder than if you mix glue and acrylic paint. I happen to get this glue at the Dollar Tree. Its brand name is Jot. It's just called clear glue. Looks like that, just clear glue. And I mixed my acrylic paint with it, and you can see it's still very runny. I've had it for a while, and you just shake it all up. The only thing that I found that I did not like with this glue is it really had a tendency to spread out as it dried. This was actually the very first one that I made. Get up here without breaking it. The first one that I made, and you can see how wide the lines of this one is. It really had a tendency to flatten out completely and spread out. I still like it. I still don't mind it. But the difference, as you can see with this one, a little thinner. I was able to do more detail with this one. So your own personal preference. I, again, prefer to use the slick fabric paint in the tiny jar. The one thing that you do want to be aware of, if you are going to mix your glue and paint, you might want to get a smaller bottle to put it in. Look at the difference between the tip of that, even though that seems small, that's really going to come out wide. But look at the difference of the fine tip of that. So they do have bottles like this at Dollar Tree. If you have a lot of just big lines, go ahead and pour it right from here. If not, get another little bottle to transfer that in. So you have your paint. You do need paintbrushes. I've seen some tutorials where they used the Q-tips to dab them on. I didn't like that as much. I found I had much more control with the paintbrushes. And the paintbrushes really do make a difference of the kind you use. You do not want to use your good paintbrushes. If you paint, don't use the good ones. Get the really cheap ones. Dollar Tree has quite a lot to choose from. And it's these synthetic bristles, as you can see up close. The synthetic ones really seem to work well because I could really push the paint around well with them. They come in all sorts of different packaging. That was a set. That was a set. Those worked really well. That was another kind of more haired brushes. They worked okay. So just get yourself some nice, cheap paintbrushes to use for this. I would suggest getting some Q-tips to be able to use because you can clean up any edges and you can reuse them. These have all dried. You can see that I cleaned up some of my areas that got too wide and just use them again. So let them dry, use them again. Also, toothpicks are great to be able to mix up your paint. For your paint, once you mix your glue and your paint together, you need to put them in something. They have these great little containers that have a little airtight lid on them. I really liked these because they were small. I could mix up tiny little batches. They really worked up well. If you don't want to, and then I could also keep them and then not have to use them right away. They lasted about 2 weeks sealed before they dried up. When they dry up, they get like little clingy plastic rubbery clings, and you can actually use these to make window decorations out of them as well, because this is what it dries like, clear. So if you do let it dry in your little containers, you'll be able to peel them right off. You could also use Dixie cups, like little plastic bathroom cups, any little containers that you have that you want to put the paint in, be able to pull it back out. Little tiny, those plastic painting palettes that they have with little indents, those would work as well. Definitely want to use acrylic paint though. I tried to use these tempera watercolors because I thought this would have a really pretty translucent look to it. Going back to this one again, for some reason, the paint, the texture and the makeup of a watercolor paint, it is resisting going up against the glue lines. So you could see it did come away in spots. Right up here, you can, if you can see that, it left a whole line there. Did not want to go up against the glue, little edge there. So I really found I had much better luck with the acrylic paint because acrylic paint has plastic in it, which makes it adhere better. So I really had a lot more success with that one. You might want a piece of wax paper to be able to put your paintbrushes on. You definitely want to protect your work surface. And I think that's about it of all the supplies that we're going to use. So let's get a little more closer to the table so you can see how I'm going to do this. All right, to start, we're going to take our picture frame. We're going to open it up. And again, any kind of picture frame, it's a great way to recycle any old ones you have around the house that you don't like anymore. Take the back off. These are able to come right off with, if you're having a hard time opening these up, you can use a knife, but this opens up fairly easy. You do not need to use the backing, so we're going to just toss that aside for now. You're going to carefully take it out of the picture frame. We'll be putting it back into that, but we don't need that right now. You definitely want to have a clean surface. You can use any kind of glass cleaning items that you have. I'm just going to use some isopropyl alcohol on a cotton ball. I just want to wipe it down, up and down, just to really make sure that my surface is clean. You do want to clean both sides, because there can be residue on some of the picture frames. You just really want the paint to adhere well. All right, so I'm going to clean that off, let that dry. For quickness sake, I'm just going to take a paper towel. Just really make sure my surface is dry. So again, you can see it is clean, it is dry. If it's a little smudgy, it's all right because we're going to be covering that. But now you can see I have a nice clear surface, nice and dry, of which I want to work on. Easiest thing to do first is you want to lay your picture down and start to do your lines. I'm going to choose this little drawing that I did. And the way I did my drawing, I'm just going to line it up so it's straight on my picture here. The way I did, if you're going to draw a picture and you want to know what size you want, you're going to put your picture frame down, take a pencil, and draw an outline from the inside of your frame. Because when you look, your frame goes in almost 1/4 of an inch many times. So if you went by the outside of your frame, you're going to be missing part of your picture. So you definitely want to lay that upside down, draw your box, or when you have your pictures printed, look at it, go, well, what am I going to be missing? Will this fit into my picture? How do I like that? How can I adjust that? So definitely want to lay it down. So now that I have my picture down, I drew this in pencil, got it to be the way that I really wanted it, and then I went over it with a black Sharpie marker, just so you could see the outlines. I probably even went a little bit more detailed in this than I should, but I think it's going to be okay. I am going to take my fabric puffy paint, give it a little bit of a shake here. Now, you want to maybe start it on your wax paper a little bit, give it a little bit of a a drop just to make sure. You can see that spread out a little bit there. So I just want to do a little bit of a line, so now I'm all right. The best way to do this is you want to either start from the top down or from the side over, because if you think about it, you don't want to be placing your hand anywhere and smudge this. The other thing you want to do is you want to try to work in continuous lines. The more continuous lines you have, the smoother it will be. But also, the fun thing with this project is when you see these little bumpy dots, that is how the old-fashioned stained glass used to look. Whenever they connected pieces together with the solder, you'd have these little bumps. So the bumps are nice too. So it's a matter of preference. Again, since I set that back up, I'm just going to get it going again. So I'm going to start from the top, and I'm just going to try to work my way around. So I'm going to start with my little circle here. Draw that. And you can see how easy this is. I'm just following my lead line. My lines on my paper. We're drawing the lead lines. I'm just squeezing as I go. Adding my stripes in. So you're just tracing. Like I said, the nice thing about this project is it really is fancy and fun to do. I had a person in class that had said, you know, I really like this. She says, I didn't think I could do this. I thought it was going to look absolutely horrible, but I'm so pleased with how it turned out. And that's what I love to hear. I love easy projects that look really fancy. So you can see I'm really not worried here if I'm following the line exactly. If it's getting a little uneven, I'm not worrying too much because I don't mind those little lead lines. I'm going to come back up here so I don't forget I made a jingle bell. So I just want to connect that line. And I'm going to follow through again. So you can just see as you're going through how quickly this goes. You definitely know where you left off because you can see the outlines. I'm just trying to follow the pattern. Trying to be aware of what's going to get stuck with what. I don't want to accidentally smear another line. But you can see how quickly this goes. And again, I'm using this as a guide, but I'm not caring too much if I'm not following it exactly. I'm getting the idea of these lines. I really like the idea of the slick paint because you can see how easily I'm able to make these thin lines, and look at how fast this is going. Now the reason I am doing the lead lines, we'll call them the lead lines first, is this has to dry. So this is definitely a 2-day project. If you were to go in and try to fill in now and paint the areas, if you touch on the black, it's obviously going to smear. It won't work well. So you definitely have to let this dry for about 24 hours. It dries really fast because we're not doing super heavy, thick lines. And it's glass, so it dries quickly. Now, I know that I didn't do the heart, but just to check, if you walk away, if you have to set this down for a minute and you walk away, I know of 2 spots that I didn't draw yet. But if I didn't remember and I wanted to check, I can lift it up and go, oh, I need to connect the arm here, and I need to put my heart in there. Then you can also look and see, well, is there anything that really didn't connect quite as well as I would have liked? That line near the jingle bell didn't follow through. If you can see that. So this is the time where you can pick it up and say, all right, I have a couple places I want to fix. So then I can just set that back on my pattern, shake it, do a couple little lines just to make sure it's going to come out okay. I can connect that line there. Up here, it got a little thin, so I want to make that a little thicker through there. I thought that was a little thin there. I want to go a little thicker there. And we might as well go a little thicker there. And then now I have to do my heart. I'm going to move it over just a little bit. And I've got my heart on my mug. So now you can see the finished project. Because it is fabric paint, this is thick. The way it's going, you can see I missed a little spot right there, so I can add that in. When you put it up against another white piece of paper, that really helps you to see, what do I need to fix? What do I need to go over? Right here, this still didn't connect a little bit, so I can just take the tip of my paint and I have paint there already. I can just connect that in. I can just bring this up. Now, if I felt an area was too thick, like maybe I didn't like this being so thick here, I can take my Q-tip, I can put it in, I can pull that out a little bit, and I can make that a little bit thinner. If I didn't like that at all, I can take a paper towel, I can go into that area and gently just wipe that whole area out. If you really hated your picture, you can do that to the whole thing too. If you were going to do the whole area and wipe it off, I would suggest re-cleaning it again with the rubbing alcohol, because you really want that to be clear. So I'm going to put this back on here. So I've shown you how to fix a mistake. Again, always start on a piece of paper just to get your line going. I'm going to bring that in, connect that line back up, smooth that little area out there. So now we're back to being great. If it dries and you really have problems that you didn't like, you can actually peel it right off. So I'm finished with this. I need to set this aside and I need to let this dry because I cannot paint on this until it is 100% dry. So let's pause that. I am going to set this aside and let's get our paints together. So now we're going to mix our paint and glue mixture, which is what we're going to use to actually paint the picture with. We're going to take our clear glue and put it in our little containers. I found it was much easier to put the glue in first, then mix your paint in. This particular glue had a little top, so if you're using this glue, don't forget to take that off. So you don't need a lot of glue, depending on your painting of what area you're going to paint. Start out with just a little bit. You can see I don't have much in that little container at all. I have just a tiny, just the barest tiny little minimum, because you really don't need a lot. It goes a very long way. The colors that I've chosen for the bird and the flower, because this has dried, I'm going to put a little bit of orange for the flowers, and you don't need a lot of paint. Start out with a little. I'm going to put a little bit in that. Start out with a little, and then you can always add more. I have some blue. I decided to do a bluebird. So I have 2 different colors of the blue. To give it highlights, you can do whatever you want, whatever colors that you want. And again, pour it in, then mix it up. I'm just going to take it and just start mixing. You just want to get the glue and the paint mixed together. And again, you can always add more glue, but you can see what little bit of paint I used, how thick that becomes. So I'm mixing each one, just a little drop. This is for my grass. Again, you do not want to use a good paintbrush because you're never going to really get all the glue out. These synthetic brushes work really well. You do want to kind of keep a container of water around, because if you want to change brushes, then throw it in the water immediately. Then you don't have to clean it out right away. Or if you're using just the one brush, you'll need to put it in to switch your colors and clean your paintbrush off. So again, here comes the light blue. Just mixing that in. It's really easy to mix. If you have the little squeeze bottles, if you prefer to use that and mix your glue, just shake it up really well. And that is how, if you want to use the glue as a lead line and either use your bottle or put it in a little container like that, you do the same thing. Pour in your glue and then put in your acrylic paint and shake it up. And you can see I did this about a month ago. It's still in there really well. It's because it's sealed, airtight. So I just want to mix those up, and then finally my orange for my flower. Just give it all a nice mix. Like I said, these little containers are fantastic. But anything that you want to do, if you drink water bottles and you have the caps left over, that would be good to use. Anything little small. You wouldn't be able to keep it and save it like you can with these, but you could use it right away. So now I have my paints ready to go. I have the same picture here that we did in class. Again, that was just traced the same way. The image was there. I'm not going to keep it under because I'm not going to use those colors exactly. I want to see what I'm doing. With this one too, you could see it had a lot of details on it, but I did not draw those details. I can always go back in and add those in later. You will notice the bumpy side of where we painted versus the reverse, the smooth side. We want to paint on the bumpy side. So we want the side, once it's dried, we want the side that we had originally drawn, so we can paint inside those layers. So let's start with the flower. I'm going to start with my orange. Let me get some on there. And you're basically just painting, pushing. You want to go right up to the line. And you're more dabbing, little strokes. because I don't want a lot of white spaces showing through. So you can see I'm just really dabbing that paint as we go. I'm not doing brush strokes like you would, you know, if I wanted to paint a big area, you would do brush strokes like this. But you can see when I do big brush strokes, see those little lines? I don't know if it's showing through, but it's not filling in. It's very streaky. So I want to just dab my paint in. You can see how quickly this goes. So again, you're just dabbing, putting some in, going right up against that lead line. The idea of this is not going to be perfect. You will see some holes in it. You will see some spaces that possibly get missed. But I like that. I love the organic look of this because that almost makes it look like the real old-fashioned stained glass, the glass part of it. Again, as you can see, I'm just kind of putting it in there, swirling around a little. When we put the Mod Podge on the back, that will hide also any other imperfections that we may have. Your most important part is just getting right up against it, dabbing around and through. And if once this dries, you're missing parts, you can go back over and paint a little bit more. There is actual glass paint that you can use. The reason I did not use glass paint for this particular project is because I didn't want a smooth, translucent look, which is what the glass paint will give you. Glass paint will give you a beautiful, smooth consistency and will have a lot of coverage. I want the thickness of this. I want it to be kind of puffy. I wanted it to be wavy. It's just another fun way to paint with another medium. And pretty inexpensive. The glass paint, when you're actually painting on glass with that, is pretty expensive. I said this was all primarily Dollar Tree, except for the acrylic paint. I did get that at Michael's. So again, just dabbing around. You can get fancy if you want to do little swirls, because old glass was really wavy. You can do that as well. So now I finished that, and you can see how much paint I still have left. I didn't use that much at all. So what I want to do is definitely put my cover back on that, close it up tight, and I'll have this orange for another project. I do want to have, you can see there's a little bit of orange that I got outside the line. I'm going to just take a little piece of cotton ball and I can clear that right up and take that right out. And again, that's why you want a piece of wax paper, so you can set all this stuff off to the side there. So let's do the bluebird. I'm going to try a bigger paintbrush for that. Let's do, I think I want to do the wings with this light color. So experiment with your paintbrushes, and you can see this is a much wider one that would cover a lot more space. But look at that, that's not really covering well. I don't like that as much. So I'm going to pass on that one. I'm going to go back to this one. So try a bunch of different types of paintbrushes. You just never know what's going to work well. And if you keep it in water, it'll stay okay. Yeah, I like this one much better. You want to dry that off too, because you don't really want a lot of water mixing with it. You can see I accidentally went over the line a little bit. I can just wipe that right away. So my lead line stays nice and dark. You could paint over it, all the way over it, and then wipe it off if you wanted to go faster. But you can see this really goes fast. Little dab will do you. So just keep tapping and moving along your lines. I'm going to speed the camera up because I don't think you need to watch me paint this whole thing now that you know what you're doing. I'm going to speed that up, and then we'll be able to come back and see what we're doing again for the next step. You can see when I mixed up my 4 colors, I forgot about his beak, and I want a yellow beak. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to just show you. I'm going to just take the yellow directly from the tube and paint it on. And you're going to be able to see a little bit of the difference. You can see that this is much more streaky because it does not have the glue in it to make it kind of stand up above the glass. So, like I said, you can paint glass with just acrylic paints as well, but I do like the look of the puffiness of the glue and the paint together. One thing I also want to note is you can see in this example along the bottom here, I'm missing some of the black line. What had happened is when I did the picture, I put it back into the glass, and you can kind of see a little bit here. It actually, I went down too far and it stuck to the glass. So to be able to take that off, what I had to do, very carefully, I took an X-Acto knife, stuck it in between the frame and the glass, and sliced through to be able to get that out so I didn't break it. So in case that happens to you, that's a great way to do it. So now what I have to do is I have to set this one aside because this has to dry at least 24 hours. 48 is great, but at least 24 hours. Go for the 48 if you can. So now what we're going to do is the back of a picture. I can't use the other 2 that I just demonstrated on because they're still wet. So this is a picture that I had started in class. You can see I didn't have a chance to finish it, but that's what the original picture will look like. So I'm just going to flip that over. This is my bumpy side. I want to paint on this side. So now we're going to turn it over to get to the smooth side. So the painted side is on the bottom. This is the smooth side. I am going to mix the 2 of them together. So I'm going to take that one paintbrush that I did not like to paint with, but I'm going to put my Mod Podge. I'm going to put my Mod Podge in there. This is the gloss. And I'm going to take a little bit of the matte. I'm going to mix that all together. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to put it on, and I'm going to pat it all around, and I'm going to do swirlies. I just want a very thin layer, but I want swirlies. You definitely want to go in a circular motion all over. You want this all covered. This one's a little harder to figure out where you've been because it's so translucent. I don't think the camera's really showing. Okay, that's better. Let's take it off of the white so you can hopefully see that better. You can see where I've been. So you can see where I've missed spots. I just want to really cover this whole thing and just swirl back and forth. And as I said, this really gives you that beautiful look of real wavy, old-fashioned stained glass. Nothing wrong with the stuff that's being made today. I absolutely love stained glass. I love stained glass artists. What they come up with is just incredible. Love it. I've taken a stained glass class before. Really enjoyed it. Would like to get into it. But for now, this is a great way to do it. I don't want to have any areas too thick. So you see, there's no rhyme or reason. You just want a nice light coating all the way to the edges. All the way to the edges. So this, you can also take your finger. It's a great tool. So if you're not liking the paintbrush or you don't want to have a separate paintbrush, just take your finger. This one, I actually like using the paintbrush a little bit more because you can see the difference of the smears that I can make. See how it is still smearing, but look at the difference. I don't know if you can see that, but you can see the brush strokes give many more little lines. And I like that when it dries. I want to see as many lines. That's why you really want to continue to go in this swirly pattern. You could paint over the top part of your project as well with the Mod Podge. It will dull it down a bit. People asked if they needed to protect it. It can scratch, so you do somewhat want to be careful with it. And I think a layer of the Mod Podge would help that, but then I also think it's going to dull down that paint. So I'm personally not going to do that. I'm just going to be very careful. And if it scratches, well, I can put some more paint and glue on and touch it up and fix it. But so again, just swirl around. Don't let many big, like here you can see this is really thick. Just a very translucent layer. And obviously you're going to do this when your other one has dried, 24 to 48 hours later. So a couple different day projects. Mod Podge dries pretty quickly, but you just really want it dry so you don't get weird fingerprints. And you don't want to put it in the frame too early, as I said, because what it can do is definitely stick to it. But if you didn't want your glass to fall out, you could probably put it in while you've just done this layer. It will adhere itself to the picture frame, and then it won't fall out. So now I am done with that. I'm going to make sure I cover that little bit back up. I don't want to pour it back into my containers. So you can see it is completely covered. You have your little swirlies all over. You know, while you're looking at it, if there's any areas that you don't like, now is the time to do it if it's a bit too bunchy. But definitely put your paintbrush back into the water, because then you can save your paintbrushes. That's why I just say don't use your really good ones, because you can never really get, no matter how much you wash it, you can never really get all the glue and Mod Podge out. But if you keep it in, you can see all I have to do is go with a little bit of soap on that. That's going to come right out. Same thing with this one, that I use the straight Mod Podge on those synthetic bristles. They really clean up nicely. So again, the reason I did that one, you'll be able to see it in this picture. You can see the translucent little swirlies all around. And then in the finished project, you can see how then instead of having just clear glass, you're having that really pretty swirl. When you're all finished and everything is dry, completely dry, you're going to put your picture back in your frame, push those down. If you want it to actually be like stained glass, you don't want to put your backing back on. What you could do is either glue or tie a string to the back of that, and then you would be able to hang your picture, or you can get the little stands. They have these at the Dollar Tree as well, and you can put it in that to display it. Just set it in one of these to display it. Or if you do want to put it up against, you can put your white paper backing back on it, and then you'd be able to hang it or set it on your table. But I like the see-throughness of the picture, so I'm going to just put a little thing. I'm going to probably hot glue a loop up at the top of mine with something to be able to hang it that way. But this was Faux Stained Glass with Crafting with Kimberly. I hope you had a great time, and we'll see you next time.